We Saw a Thing is a movie podcast about remakes and sequels.
We saw a thing and talked about it.
This week, the guys talk about the Thomas Crown Affair.
The following conversation has been edited for brevity.
I did not enjoy either Thomas Crown Affair.
I wrote a little note to myself that I wanted to read to you. This is about the original.
All right, please do.
Okay, so it's a movie about a sexy, successful woman who is empowered in her job, who then meets a dude she's attracted to, who is intimidated by her power. So he mentally abuses her into believing he loves her and then uses her to steal from a bank and get away with it. And then he gets the hero shot at the end of the movie like he's done something amazing. And I think that makes me hate everyone involved in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't have pulled off the second bank heist without her. I mean, she can either be a criminal or be incriminated. Holy shit. What an ending.
It is a bad ending. I did appreciate that they changed the ending in the new one so that they got to be together.
Oh, I don't want them together at all.
In either version, I never bought them as a couple. Like, I didn't buy the sexual tension. I didn't buy the chemistry. I didn't buy any. I bought it less between Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway.
I believed it more with Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway, if only for the chess scene, which was probably my favorite scene in the whole film.
Really?
But the rest of the thing, not much. Like, it wasn't doing much for me.
Even that scene didn't do anything for me. I didn't find there was any heat there at all. Like, neither of them seemed that into it.
I thought the anticipation before the world's worst kiss, which when I was going through my stuff, that took 8 hours over a number of days to perform that kiss. And it is a gross kiss.
Do you remember that YouTube video that was going around? It was from some reality show, and it was this couple's very first kiss at their wedding, and they kind of look like they're sucking each other's face off.
Yes. It looked like they'd never kissed before. That's how it looked.
It reminded me of any time Vin Diesel has to kiss in a movie.
Oh, God. And I've never really seen a lot of Steve McQueen stuff. So this is one of my first entries into Steve McQueen. And I got to say, I liked him more than Pierce Brosnan. Not for charm or anything. I just liked him more. Pierce Brosnan always felt to me like he was entitled and rich. He was too into the cat and mouse, I guess. At least Steve McQueen played like he was okay with being a couple until he wasn't.
I appreciated that they changed from armed robbery bank heist to nobody armed and art in the second one.
Because damn, it looked dangerous. It looked scary.
Yes. And it felt a little bit more like a thing that someone would do if they're rich and bored and just wanted to like prove something to themselves. Like it felt the bank heists they felt mean and angry and vicious in a way that the art thefts didn't.
It felt malicious.
Yeah, it did. And so it gave Steve McQueen's character an edge that I didn't enjoy. But also, like, I've seen him in other things. I've seen him in, like, The Great Escape and stuff. And, like, I don't know. He's, like, one of those actors that I find is just kind of the same in everything I've seen him in. Right. And granted, I've seen him now in 3 things. But I don't think he's this amazing actor, and I don't think he's super charismatic. That's like the big reason I didn't buy that Faye Dunaway was just so taken with him, is that there just didn't seem to be any chemistry between them as actors.
I want to just touch on that bank scene because while I was reading up on what that was all about, it was an actual bank. The guards and the bank officials knew what was going to happen. The customers did not know what was going to happen. And the filmmakers all used concealed cameras. So even though all these customers actually thought this was a real robbery occurring, none of the customers or pedestrians interfered in any way with what was happening. No one called the police. Nothing.
That's a little bit terrifying and awful.
That's messed up.
That seems super messed up on a lot of levels. Like the first level being,
why choose to do that?
That's so traumatizing to people for a movie. Like, ugh.
And here's the thing, like Norman Jewison is a Canadian icon, a lovely director from Canada. He's got all kinds of stuff under his belt that are considered treasures. In the Heat of the Night, Moonstruck, Fiddler on the Roof, you got Hurricane in there. This is a miss for me on all counts, except I did like the chess scene, and I liked, because I couldn't figure out how they did it, the multiple image shots. How did somebody get those multiple images onto a film reel?
That would have been really, really hard to do, and I hated it. I hated it every time they did it in the movie. And there was a lot of weird camera moves in this movie. There was a shot where they're walking down a street and the camera just randomly turns towards a reflection of them in a window, but like they're not super well reflected in the window. It just seemed like whoever edited, whatever cinematographer was involved in this, like really thought they had something cool going on. It was so distracting to have multiple of the same shot on the screen. It felt like a very late 60s thing, but it felt like a very late 60s like television thing to me. It just felt cheap and distracting, and I hated it. I hated it so much.
Apparently, that was this was one of the first times you'd ever seen that on film. He copied it from an Expo 67 in a certain other couple films that came the year before, but this is one of the first times a mainstream film did that.
It looks like the first attempt at something.
They also mounted a camera onto a chest harness of one of the players playing polo. At that time would be, what, an extra 80 pounds on you?
That would have been difficult.
Like, this is not a GoPro.
It was just a weird thing to me that didn't add to the story at all. Like, it reminded me a little of like Ocean's 11, where you've got like all these characters that you know and care about who are doing different things, and now all of a sudden you're intercutting between them.
Yeah, but Ocean's 11 is just so much better.
Yeah, we didn't know who any of these characters were. None of them mattered to the plot at the end of the day. We were introduced to the driver at the beginning, but none of the rest of them.
And even the two leads you don't think are good people, so you don't care about what happens to them.
Yeah, so when you've got that kind of intercutting and like layering of different kinds of shots, there's no emotional investment as an audience member in what is happening at all. And so none of it mattered. Like, I didn't need to know or care about what was happening with all of these different people involved in the heist at any point. I mean, we've talked about this before, just things that are helpful to telling a story versus things that aren't, right? And we brought it up in January after we'd seen 1917, where the continuous shot of that movie was helpful to telling the story they were trying to portray. Whereas in Birdman, they did the same kind of thing by editing it together to look like it was one shot, but if they had just not done that, it wouldn't have affected the storytelling at all. And we even talked about that with Psycho, that to have it in black and white made it so much more intense, and it added to the film. It was additive. That would have been a ton of work for just the sake of doing the work. There was nothing that helped the plot along by doing that.
I felt like both films were very disjointed as storytelling in general. Like, there's a lot of leaps of faith that both of these stories take, specifically in the 1999 version where they're going to see forgers all of a sudden, and you kind of forgot for a minute that they're still investigating Thomas Crown, and then it turns out that he's the legal guardian of the forger's daughter. All these different areas that the film takes you on that don't matter, and all we really wanted to see was a cool heist scene. And I think the 1999 version has a cool heist scene, maybe even 1.5 cool heist scenes, but the rest of the movie is, it doesn't matter. Just to prove that Pierce Brosnan isn't a bad guy, putting the painting back is such a big FU to everyone who's trying to solve this thing.
Again, we're into another scenario like with A Perfect Murder, where they've changed stuff that doesn't help things, and they've changed stuff that sometimes hurts, and they've overcomplicated a thing that didn't need to be overcomplicated.
Although I am with you that by changing it to art, I find that was helpful.
Because it made it feel more like he was just a bored, rich, smart dude who just wanted to see if he could get away with it.
That's right. Exactly. And he has all this time and all this money, and he does all these things because he's just bored. One of the things they added was inserting Faye Dunaway into the 1999 version as let's face it, a really crappy therapist who basically laughs at her client every single time he comes in.
That was great. She's just openly laughing at him.
A bizarre thing, but also just to say, hey, we got that thing from that other thing you used to like. It's in this thing now. Sure. Well, like, I understand cameos. It did nothing for the overall story. I thought the entire time they were terrible for each other. I thought they're both really, really crappy people who don't deserve happiness at the end, and they get happiness at the end, and I don't care.
Yeah, also, like, the nice shout out to the pre-9/11 world where she jumps over the airplane seat and the stewardess just lets them go.
Oh, yeah, just lets them totally go at it.
Yeah.
Which was weird. But
So
also,
weird.
how many screechy scenes were there where they're basically attacking one another? That's when you know you're not in a great relationship.
But also, like, a very overly long and gratuitous sex scene in the middle of this movie.
Oh, which was so unnecessary. Having Rene Russo naked at all, I don't know why it needed to be there.
Yeah, she was topless a lot in this movie.
To tell us she's liberated?
It seemed like a very deliberate call to establish things about her character that didn't need to be established that way. We'd already been shown the things that were important about her character.
Yeah, she's smart, she's clever, and she's going to get her way.
And she's kind of like losing herself in this thing a little bit.
She likes the cat and mouse.
Yeah, but that was the thing I really hated about the first one, is that just based on the imagery to end that movie, we're given a story with an ending, and the ending is, what a clever, amazing dude this guy is. Look what he just got away with. But meanwhile, we've just spent, the previous hour 45 watching him, emotionally manipulate this woman.
Again and again and again, which is not something that Steve McQueen did.
No, that's what I mean. That's what he did do in the original. In the 68 version, he's just abusing her mentally and emotionally. And then he gets away with it, and you get that hero shot at the end of him on the plane, like, laughing again to himself because he pulled the wool over another one's eyes, right? Like, he just got away with this thing again.
I disagree. I don't think he's showing that the entire length of the film in the same way that Pierce Brosnan is. Pierce Brosnan is making sure he's being photographed by Anna, knowing it's going back to her, knowing he is, like, getting in her head.
He did the exact same thing in the original.
Well, he knew that she would get photographed, but not...
It was the exact same plot point.
Maybe I missed a step.
She confronted him about being with other women. And he says, well, I had to make you angry to know whether or not this was real. That was the thing that made it super devious to me, is that he's, like, really, like, torturing her emotionally and manipulating her mentally to believe that, he needs to test her to make sure that she's as invested in this relationship and is as in love with him as he is with her. And then he walks away at the end with that, that giggle on the airplane. That's why I thought he was just an asshole.
I gotta say, a movie about a bank heist that stars Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway, I thought was going to be more interesting and hold my attention. It was pretty boring.
Right.
So I must have just, I don't know, maybe I zoned out for a minute during the crazy 5-minute montage of all the glamorous flying in the air and the best picture winning song and all that. I don't know, but it was super boring to me.
It was.
Can I say something about the Thomas Crown Affair from 1999?
I wish you would.
At the very beginning in the heist, which is a very cool shot scene, and I like how he gets away with not being a suspect at first. Like, it's really, really clever the way they do that art heist.
Yeah, that was a clever art heist.
John McTiernan, the director, later decided that audiences might be put off with the Claude Monet painting breaking the back of it so it would fit in a briefcase. So he decided to re-edit it so that it only showed Crown putting the folded painting into the briefcase and not breaking it, and figured most people wouldn't catch on to the fact that the briefcase was half the size of the painting.
That's so funny, because I immediately noticed that. It was so annoyed.
I could not understand how the briefcase worked. I kept rewinding it and going, what is this?
I was so annoyed at that shot, because I was like, oh, well, very clearly the painting doesn't fit his briefcase. He's going to have some magic briefcase that turns into, like, a bigger, like, art carrying case or something. But no, he just breaks it in half very clearly. That was so angering.
And then when he walked away and it was fine, I was like, did he have another piece that just went on top of this? So it was like an open briefcase, but he had another open briefcase just that laid over top. I couldn't get it out of my head. I just saw that John McTiernan was like, oh, people could be put off. Well, I was in my brain for 10 minutes trying to figure out what the hell you just choreographed.
That was a weird moment in an otherwise very slick heist scene.
Especially when you get that second briefcase that was like filled with titanium. They really put thought into these briefcases. So what happened?
And they put a ton of thought into the security cameras as well, like having the AC break down and then having the temperature rise enough that their heat sensing cameras don't work to tell what's going on in the room. Like, it was very well thought out.
I like the ending too with all the bowler hats. I thought that was clever, and especially the nod to what they had seen earlier with the bowler hat gentleman. One of the things that was interesting was the frame he put on the painting that he donated held open the shutters, but he also slid a pencil in as well.
That whole thing seemed like way too on the nose. Like, why have pencils that have your name on them? Why the little shot of the plaque with his name on it? Like, it was just very clear what was happening. They didn't need to have those extra nods. It was almost like he was like, hey guys, I did this and I gave up. That would be like proof to arrest him, no?
It would be proof to arrest him, yes!
So why do that? That seems weird to me.
Look, man, I don't know. He purposely dumped a sailboat. It was a good-looking sailboat, and he purposely, destroyed it.
Yeah, and then he let her burn that painting, too, so he didn't seem to care about losing money.
I don't think he cared about much.
That was a thing that was stronger in the 68 version I found, was that Steve McQueen had a bit of a gambling streak in him, and that showed up in a few different places in the movie, and that didn't happen in the remake.
No, we only saw the golf scene.
We never really got a sense that, he's really gambling on this, and this is just really high stakes gambling for him.
So this is a John McTiernan film. John McTiernan is another really respected director, especially action. Die Hard, Predator, The Hunt for Red October, Last Action Hero, and one of my favorite movies, The 13th Warrior, which doesn't get a lot of acclaim, but I really, really like it. You can see that he's got action chops when it comes to this film, but I feel like all the dramatic stuff does not work.
I agree. I didn't think the romance worked. I didn't think the dramatic beats worked. I thought the happy ending was kind of stupid.
This is only the first of two remakes that John McTiernan would do from Norman Jewison. The other one was Rollerball.
Right, which he did a few years later.
Which, again, is a strange thing to do. Do you really love Norman Jewison movies so much? Are you going to remake Moonstruck next? Because I don't think you can do it.
Well, he doesn't have, a released directing credit since 2003, so, maybe he's biding his time. I don't know. I wonder what he's been up to. That's interesting.
Just spending his money, crashing some sailboats, probably stole some priceless art. Just being that guy.
This is the first time since we have moved to this format of watching 2 movies per podcast episode where I've not enjoyed either of them.
Oh, this is my second time. We did this movie called The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes.
Oh, right. See, I forgot about that because that was really forgettable and I've tried to push it out of my brain.
You're very welcome. I will never let you forget that I made you watch that crap.
Well, last week I asked if maybe we could watch something better, and these were definitely better than Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, but they weren't great, so I'm hoping that next week we can improve on this slightly.
They're both fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. The Thomas Crown Affair worldwide gross in 1968, I don't think this is a hit, was $43,050 on a budget of $4.3 million. Again, don't know the business model of these old movies, but the remake in 1999 had a budget of $48 million and worldwide gross was $124. So this is a big hit movie.
You're talking about Pierce Brosnan, who's in a tuxedo and being very James Bondy at points in this movie, which was very fun. I was reading that the scene where she comes in and he's dancing with Anna, he had to have his tux not completely buttoned up because it was some contractual thing with his James Bond character. So he couldn't be fully buttoned up. He had to have his bow tie kind of undone.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and then apparently there's another shot of him looking at a watch, and they had to get rid of the logo on the watch because Pierce Brosnan had a deal with Tag Heuer for advertising, and it wasn't that brand. So they had to get rid of it. It's so stupid, right? But like, this is kind of him at the height of his like James Bond fame.
That's a good point. Yeah.
He was a bankable star at that point. It didn't matter what he was in.
Rene Russo being the secondary star, like, she doesn't feel like a 1999 powerhouse to stand up with Pierce Brosnan.
I don't know. I always like her and stuff. I never mind her. So the same year that Thomas Crown Affair came out, so did The World Is Not Enough. Oh, maybe it's Omega that he's with. Maybe it's not Tag Heuer. Whatever. It doesn't matter. That's such a dumb thing to have to do.
Does not matter. It's some James Bondy crap.
But he was in quite a few movies around then, right? Like 97 to 99, he did 9 movies.
Wow.
And then he also had 3 in 96 with like Mars Attacks, The Mirror Has Two Faces. But GoldenEye was 95.
That was his big action movie.
I mean, by the time Thomas Crown Affair came out, he'd been in 3 James Bond movies, including the one that came out the same year.
Now I'm trying to think back to Knives Out and what Daniel Craig was wearing, and if he was contractually obligated for some Bond stuff, and he had to be that Southern gentleman because he's James Bond and can't have a British accent in any other movie.
That seems so stupid, right? Like, it's the same thing with Justice League, where Superman, they had to CGI out the mustache from the Mission Impossible movie he was filming at the same time. It's so dumb.
That to me, and for what it was, that to me is like, just wait till he's done filming the other movie, guys.
That Justice League movie still really pisses me off.
Well, yeah. Almost as much as Thomas Crown Affair or more?
More, because why didn't they just push the release?
Because they were never going to get that movie right.
The smart thing to do is push the release. Like, my thought right now is look at all these movies that are getting, pushed and that kind of thing. And like, there's never enough time to finish things like special effects or like get the edit exactly the way you want it. All of these movies are always on a timetable, especially the big budget ones. If there's stuff that wasn't quite ready for Black Widow, the world gave them more time to finish it. So are they? That would be a really interesting thing to know.
Do better.
Yeah. The whole Marvel release schedule got shifted by like 8 months. So that's just bought them more time to do things. And I don't understand why they didn't think about that for Justice League. Whatever. We're talking about Thomas Crown Affair. Why am I going off on Justice League?
Thomas Crown Affair. I do not recommend you watch these movies. There are better movies.
There's lots of better movies we've talked about recently. You should go watch those if you didn't already. Both of these movies were just super disappointing. I think I was just expecting them to be more fun.
You know what this did? It reminded me that Dennis Leary was once a thing.
He's a good actor.
Yeah, he wasn't bad.
I don't think he gets enough credit. There are actually a lot of stand-up comedians who end up being good actors.
Oh, yeah, because being funny is harder than being dramatic.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of stand-up comedians, their comedy comes from pain, and so these are people who understand how to dip into that and then shift it.
I forgot all about him, and then I saw this movie.
All right, well, I guess next week we'll watch Keanu Reeves act up a storm, and
oh my God. What are we doing to ourselves, man?
I know, man. We've really stacked up some garbage movies here, but we've got 310 to Yuma coming up, so, I mean, if you skip next week's episode, I wouldn't blame you, and if you skipped this week's episode, I don't blame you either, but you should come back for 310 to Yuma.
You should definitely come back for 310 to Yuma. I think we'll have things to say about it.
And then you put Flipper on the list, too. Dude, what is happening? Why do I let you do this?
Because you love me.
Next time on We Saw a Thing.
Okay, so next Thursday, the guys are watching The Day the Earth Stood Still. Is an emotionless, highly intelligent alien being the role Keanu Reeves was born to play? Will this be the first remake we watch that's better than its classic original?
We Saw a Thing is hosted by Jay Kennedy and Chris Shapcott. Produced by Shapcuts Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And check our show notes for links to our social media and credits. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts.